start with literally.
Yeah.
There we go. Now I'm broadcasting live. Okay. Yeah, so for this one, we're just going to go over classroom management, but that's a really, really broad topic. There's a lot of things you could possibly go over with classroom management. So one of the big things that I like to start off with first is just talking about the temperament of the kids, because we've talked about it a lot in the trainings. Kids, they do well if they can. If they're acting up, it's normally because something's wrong. Either they want attention, or they're bored, or they feel like they don't understand, or maybe they feel left out. So that's always something that you should watch for, is trying to understand what is the problem, what's causing it. And I call it the teacher instinct. As you keep teaching and you get used to being in front of a class, you start to develop this sort of instinct for when the kids are listening, when they're starting to get a little confused, when they're starting to get restless. And for the most part, that just comes with time. If you're a very intuitive person and you are pretty aware of other people and their needs, that is going to come a lot more easily to you. If people are a little bit more of a mystery, then it's going to take you a little bit longer. But everybody develops them, I think, in their own time, in their own way, and it's really, really helpful. Actually, teaching in China really helped me with that instinct, because I was able to use language to, figure that out with my students and listen for that when the kids were chatting. But in China, they'd speak and it was all in Chinese. So if a kid said, "I'm bored," to another kid, I had no idea what they were saying. So I really had to rely on my personal instincts and just feeling the classroom and the energy of the class. So that actually was really valuable to learn. So you'd be surprised how much just looking at body language and things, actually, if you study people's body language and things like that, you'd be surprised how much that can help you as a teacher. Yeah, so I guess one of the first things we can talk about is when you can feel your class kind of getting restless. So you're trying to talk to the kids and, you notice they're shuffling papers, or they're fiddling, or they're like laying on their hands. They're not really paying attention. It's really good to maybe analyze why. Is it super hot? Have they just come from a class where they were all sitting and not paying attention? Maybe they want to run around for a minute. In a situation like that, if they're all just maybe they're all falling asleep or they're not paying attention, I actually get them to jump up and do something for a little bit. I get them just maybe 5 minutes. We'll get up, run around, do something, and then we'll come back. And then I try to recenter them that way. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. So a big recommendation for me is keep your lesson plans really fluid. I really like low-key classroom. I really like puzzles and things that make the kids think, and creative lessons. And that is more my style. But sometimes you plan this and the kids they're just not feeling it. They want to do something more active, or you plan something super active and the kids, they're not interested right now. Maybe it's too hot that day, or maybe they just had break and they ran around too much. So that is really important, to try to think of ways that you can take the same lesson. What is the goal of this lesson, and how can I change what we're doing? So for example, if my kids were super restless in herbology, I would probably try to take exactly what we're doing, but make it active. So I'd be like, okay, so maybe I'll make some obstacles and you have to run around and find your items, and then you can put them into the jars that I gave you. Because normally I like the kids to just sort of sit and brainstorm. What are they going to do? What are they going to use? What do they want? But if they're really just restless and not sitting still, then I'll try to find some kind of way to make it into a game. Or I could maybe rush them making the bottles or the potions or whatever they're making, and then we can role play some kind of game where they use what they just made. But just sort of keeping some kind of idea in your head, like how could I use the same thing? Because my goal at the end of the day is to get the kids to work together to make something, whether it's a magical flower or some kind of magical potion with the herbs. But at the end of the day, I'd really just want the kids to work together and make something and work as a team. And that's always my goal with herbology. So as long as they are doing that same goal, then that's all that really matters at the end of the day. So it doesn't have to be done exactly how I wanted it done. So, And that can be one of the hardest things to learn, is that you have an idea in your head of how you want this to go and exactly what's going to happen. And that doesn't always happen, Yeah, the kids, and sometimes those can lead to some of the best lessons, is just making small changes to things. When I was in China, I was using word searches, and I really loved them. I thought they were great. Like, the kids would sit and really look for the words and hunt and try to figure out how to spell. Plus, they were thinking in English a lot. I thought it was a great lesson plan. But sometimes it was just too quiet. The kids would sit and they would get really restless. Some kids would finish before the others, and it just it wasn't really good for keeping control over the class. It was good for like downtime. But my teaching assistant just sort of made a suggestion. She was like, why don't you make a PPT of the words that they're looking for? Like, don't give them the words on the paper. Make a PPT with the picture, and then the kids, they have to go through each slide with you. And then you're sort of keeping them on pace. And as soon as I made that small adjustment, it became more fun. We could make a race out of it if they were really antsy. We could go a little slower if they wanted. The kids that finished more quickly, they could help the other students if needed. And it really kept everybody on the same pace. And it was a lot more controlled. And I could stretch it or, shorten it if needed. And it was one of the best sort of adjustments and quick thinking I've had someone suggest to me. And it was really good. I used them all the time with all different levels, and the kids loved it. So really staying in tune to the kids and trying to figure out what do they need and what do they want, that's going to be one of your best, just can't think of the word, one of your best tools. So, if your class is, maybe they've gotten like super out of control in that case. If you're finding that you really can't get control back over your class, try to, well, number one, take a breath, breathe. And remember, you're the adult. So knowing that and trying to really keep hold of that, that's going to help you a lot. Breathe, remember that you're the adult, and figure out what's not giving you control. If the kids are too loud, tell them to stop talking. If they are running around, make them sit down. And if they won't listen, turn the lights out. Or you can like bang on something if you need to get their attention. We used something, we called it a bark. Like, obviously don't scare the kids. Don't like slam on them or anything like that. But there was a technique, we called it a bark. And whenever the kids are not listening, my favorite one to use is oi. So if the kids are not listening, I'll go oi. And a lot of the time that'll actually shock them and bring them back. A popular one I like to use at camp, like when we use the 3 fingers in the air, that's a really good, I actually love that technique. I think it's a great way to get the kids to center themselves back. Ash is quack, quack. That's really, really good, because then the kids just say quack, 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 and they all pay attention. I really like to use if you can hear me clap once, if you can hear me clap twice. And my technique with that is I don't like to yell. Kids don't really respond very well to yelling. I don't know if you can remember any time like a teacher or a parent or just some kind of adult like really yelled at you. Can you think of a time that that's happened to you?
We one time had they weren't really yelling at us to quiet down. It wasn't to me, but I witnessed it because we volunteered at a classroom last year, and there was a teacher that was kind of started to yell at his kids really bad, and he was like, "You all need to be quiet," and blah 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 blah. But he was just kind of yelling at this really aggressive tone when they weren't really doing anything. And I was scared. I was like, "Yes, sir, yes, sir." But yeah, they were all kind of. It wasn't the best way to go at it. But
yeah, and the fact that like even to this day you kind of have this like, I don't think that was such a good like. We lose respect for people when they start screaming because we see them as not in control. That's why they're screaming. So anytime you yell at the kids, there's using a bark to get their attention, and there is raising your voice to sort of get them to understand they need to quiet. But ultimately, if the kids are quiet, definitely don't keep yelling. There's no point in that. And actually, it makes you look like you have a lot less control than you really do. So, and then that's just a good reminder for ourselves. You know, they're kids. They're going to get under your skin. They're going to frustrate you. But at the end of the day, we have to be the ones who take a deep breath and remember that we're the ones who are in charge. I definitely recommend, I mean, I use the teacher shame all the time. It's like my number one method of keeping my kids in line is the teacher shame. I take the method of, I know that you are better than this, that you are capable of so much more, and I don't know why you would choose to act like less than you are. And it's pretty powerful. Kids respond pretty strongly to that. But it also depends on the kid, and it depends on your method. I find with each of the houses, each of the kids respond to different things. Wave riders respond very, very well to disappointment and to telling them, like, you agreed to listen and follow, so I don't understand why you're not doing this. Why would you choose to act this way? Because to not listen is a choice, and you're choosing not to listen. Wave rider responds very, very well to that. Phoenix Deer, they respond very well to empathy. If you tell them, like, I worked very hard on this lesson and you are not showing me respect, and I don't know why you feel I don't deserve respect. The Phoenix Deers, they very much are like, oh no, I didn't mean to, no, come back. And I never knew to take that technique until I was talking to some of the Phoenix Deer counselors, and they were like, use empathy, guilt them, they will respond to it. And one day I did that and it worked like a charm. So, yeah. Dragonors, I like to point out to them that they're wasting their time. Like, you could be enjoying this lesson, or you could be, you know, getting something out of this or experiencing things, and instead we're sitting here and just, you know, going through all this stuff because you guys won't listen. I don't know why this is how you would rather spend your time. Mm-hmm. And they tend to respond to that pretty well. I'm like, you know, if your goal here is to have fun, then are you having more fun with me scolding you and trying to get you to come back to attention, or is it more fun to actually, you know, participate and be in the lesson? Mm-hmm. And that tends to bring them back around. And I mean, I wouldn't be afraid to just ask them, like, what are we missing here? But don't give them too much control, but just tell them, like, bring them in. Be like, well, what is it that we're missing here? Because I'm trying my best and you're not listening. So what am I not giving you? Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna take notes while we do this.
By all means. Yeah. Now you have to be careful with that, because you don't want to come off like you're giving them control. Mm-hmm. But you can give them the floor to give you input and explain to you how they're feeling. So you really have to walk the line with that and be sure that you're still maintaining control if you're gonna use that with your kids.
Mm-hmm. And where is oh, sorry, you might get into this after I ask, but where is kind of the line between the taking control and kind of not really telling them what to do, but being like, here's what we should do, and kind of being too authoritative where it's not fun anymore? Like, they feel like they're kind of being told what to do in a not, hey, let's do it this way. I don't know how to word it correctly, but
yeah, no, it's okay. It's okay. Where are you trying to maintain control versus basically being a dictator? Is that what you're?
I think it's kind of that, but also kind of how far can you kind of be the person in control without making it seem, oh gosh. You can explain that part, and I'll try to see.
Yeah. So I think what you're asking is, like, at what point are you not giving the kids enough freedom? Like, at what point are you just keeping control at all times? This was something I struggled with at first, because I was made head of discipline fairly quickly. I always kept a really tight hold on my classroom and really, really didn't let up. And while this was great for keeping my class in line, it wasn't really that great for giving my kids the freedom to create and explore. And it definitely didn't give them any freedom to really be learning from me. I was kind of talking at them. And I think personally, it's trying to find the balance. Like, they tell us in teaching that really it should be like 70-30. Like the teacher should be doing like about 30% of the talking and the kids should be doing about 70%. That's when they're learning a language. But I do think that that actually works quite well in your classroom. I don't think it necessarily has to be speech, but the kids should still be participating. So if it's you just kind of being like, okay, now you're going to do this. Okay, now you're going to do this. Okay, now you're going to do this. It's not necessarily what we're here for the girls to do, especially in this particular line of work. We're here to build their confidence and teach them some self-esteem and how to go about things. And I think for them, we want to give them a bit more than they would normally get in a classroom. But there is the issue of trying to make sure you maintain control. So I think a good technique is to give them options. Like we can do it like this, or we can do it like this. And then, you know, if the kids are having trouble, you know, you can tell them like, this is the way that you chose to do it. So what are we struggling with here? And I open the floor for them. Like maybe they don't like the way that I've chosen to have them make the bottles in herbology. So I can tell them, okay, we can do it by playing a game, or we can do it by you guys sitting and discussing like it's a puzzle. Which way would you guys like to do it? So if they choose one certain method and then they're not happy, I can sort of open the floor to be like, okay, do you guys see another way that we could do this? How would you rather do this? But honestly, it should be fairly easy to eventually, not right out, I mean, maybe not right away, but you will develop the instinct where you can tell maybe the kids chose that they wanted to run around and it's not really working, or they don't really want to do a puzzle game, so you're going to switch it up. Maybe you can find a way to blend the two together. And a lot of those things come just from spur of the moment. You know, you'll be like, oh, maybe we can try it this way. And that can sometimes come up with some of the best games. You'd be surprised. Yeah. I mean, I always go in thinking like, all right, I'm gonna teach herbology this way, and then by the end, it normally ends up going completely differently than I expected. So, yeah. Especially back when we used to teach the same lesson multiple times, that was because everybody did the same lessons, and that was really like by the end, it was like night and day between, because I had taught the same lesson like, you know, 10 times, 12 times, 15 times. So it's kind of like live theater, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, you can see the same thing over and over because it's never going to be the exact same thing twice. Yeah. I'm sorry, did you have a question? I think I cut you off.
Oh, no, I was just saying, just like,
yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and a big thing, I think actually mistakes. You'd be surprised how much can come just from using a mistake and going with it. I remember one time I was writing on the board when I was in China, and I misspelled a word. And one of my kids like raised his hand and he was like, teacher, that's not how you spell, I don't remember what it was, say apple. And I like turned around and was like, good job, you caught me. And like awkwardly corrected it. And from then on, it actually became a game. As I was writing, I would purposefully write some of the words incorrectly and see if the kids could catch me. And if they did, I would give them like points or stickers, or we had little magic dollars. And it you know, just coming back from a mistake ended up being one of the most valuable things. Yeah, they really enjoyed it. And just being a bit more fluid and not feeling like you have to do something a certain way. I would play hangman with my kids. I would get up and I would write on the board, and the kids loved it. You know, I would try to use some easy words, and then I would slowly move into harder words, and they would really enjoy it. But I realized I was a lot of the focal point. So I tried having one kid come up, and I would take a really small whiteboard like this, and I would write the word out for them because they're like 8, you know, they don't remember the word by heart. And I would write it on the whiteboard for them, and the kids would have something to look at, and then they would tell me the word, I'd write it out, and then they would be the teacher. And the kids would say the letters, and they'd go and look and see whether or not the letter was there. And it was really fun. And the kids I would tell them they had to use words from the book or from the vocabulary list. And they would go for some really hard, interesting words. It was really cool. So we were doing animals on the farm once, and like there was a little tiny section about honeybees. It was really, really small, and one of my kids decided to use the word honey, and that went on for so long the kids could not figure out what word that this other kid had chosen, and that used to entertain them for hours.
Yeah.
Like, I was surprised how much they could just sit there and listen. So.
Cool.
Yeah, and it came just from realizing that, maybe there was a better way. Even though it was working, I was kind of like, okay, how can I get the kids a little bit more involved here? Because it shouldn't just be me.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. And again, it really depends on the goal of your class. I mean, if the goal is to get the kids to team build, then maybe find a way to, have the kids work together as a team. If the goal is for them to be a little bit more independent, then maybe not. But I really think adjusting and things, it's really not a bad thing. And it really shows that you're a really fluid and strong teacher if you can think on your feet or ahead. You can think, okay, if it's too hot, we can do it this way. Or if it's raining, we could do it this way. Okay. Trying to keep that in your head, ahead of time. Or even just as you're starting the class, you can sort of maybe think in your head, like, okay, what could I do if this goes wrong? And those can help quite a lot. I mean, I've had plenty of last minute classes where like I was given the lesson plan and I think the person had a really good idea of how to run that activity. And I didn't understand it. So I would try to run it and it just wouldn't work. And so I would be like, I'm going to do it this way. And I've tried to change because whatever they wanted me to do wasn't working with the kids. And I'm trying to think of an example of that. Because sometimes they'll give me games and I just, this happens to me now because I still teach online in the mornings and it's someone else's lesson plan. Because it's always us teaching at like 5:30 in the morning. They never make us write our own lesson plans. They give you one. And they don't always write that clearly. They'll be like, oh, I want you to teach this way. So if I'm trying to play a game, and I can see my kids they're not really listening, they're getting super restless, they can tell that I'm unsure. So I'm going to take that game and I'm going to turn it into something that I would personally use. Because if I'm unsure of what I'm doing, it's going to be fairly obvious. So I just try to make sure that I am using it in a way that I think that the kids are going to learn and in a way that I'm comfortable with and that they're comfortable with. And there's nothing wrong with changing on the fly. It actually really shows that you're a really solid teacher if you can change on the fly. So, but it all comes with time. It's not something you immediately can do. So, try to keep these things in mind and, don't be too hard on yourself. Yeah, because feeling out of class, I mean, it really comes down to, if you're giving them things, I mean, that can also help. Trying to eliminate those kinds of issues, especially with the first years. Definitely, if you're giving out papers, don't give the first year's papers right away. They're going to start fiddling with them. They're going to start playing with them. A better way to keep their focus is maybe have one in front of you. Like if I have my little glass bottle. Sorry, I keep bringing up herbology. I swear I teach more subjects. But if we're going to use the little bottles, I'm definitely not going to give those to them right away because they're just going to fiddle with them. They're just going to play with them. One of them might even break one of them. I'm only going to give those out when I'm ready to. I even like when I keep all of my items already put out so that I don't have to do that. And I cover them with a sheet so that the kids aren't immediately coming in and because they're curious and they're naturally going to be curious and you can't be angry at them for that. I mean, you want them to be interested in your lesson and you want them to be intrigued. So for your own sanity, try to come up with ways to be like, okay, if I give it to them at this time, I can control what they're going to be doing. And finding methods of like, if like herbology is a good example because I have so many little things that I use with the kids, like so many things that I have to give out and trying to think ahead and find a way like glitter. Just sitting glitter out on the tables is probably a really bad idea. Yeah. So I would have the kids come up and line up and walk up and take the items as they were going. So, because one of the lesson plans that's coming to mind, Were you a camper? I can't remember.
I was.
Okay. Did you take herbology with me? Did you do the glass bottles with the potions where we put the herbs in?
I remember putting some glitter, and we had different, like a fly potion or invisibility potion.
Mm-hmm.
Or was that class?
That's the one I'm thinking of.
Okay.
Yeah. So specifically for that one, I had all of you guys sit down in your groups and think ahead of time, what did you want, so that we didn't have any fighting over them. Because part of my team building, I really wanted you guys to decide who got what. And that was why I had, like, if someone chooses something, it's gone. No one in the group gets, only one person gets fly, and only one person gets, invisibility or whatever. And I wanted you guys to do that in groups together before you got up, because I didn't want people fighting over the different objects. Then I'd get everybody to line up and come up and tell, I think we had a prefect, myself, and a floater who were all giving the different objects. And it did keep a lot of control. That actually may be an example of, taking a little too much control. I probably could have let them maybe cut the flowers themselves or something, but it did keep everything nice and even. But that was a lot of little components and things that everybody had to use together. But like, if you're playing a game, don't leave the balls out right in front of the kids. I mean, you're kind of taunting them, keep them maybe to the side. If you're trying to explain the rules, maybe only pick up one at a time to show them, especially if they're young. If they're older, they can probably focus a little more. But if it's the hot hours of the day and they're super young and you're kind of giving them something to fiddle with, like, it's kind of like playing with fire, so.
Okay.
Okay. But that's another instinct you sort of develop as you go. Like, there's been times that I walked in and was like, we can't do that, I'm going to cover this. And somebody was like, oh, that was a really smart idea. I'm like, well, it's obvious at this point. When I was in China, we would do things where we would, we did a class on buying and selling, and they would put toys out for the kids to buy and sell with. And they were like, I don't know, they just keep coming through the door and they immediately go for the toys and I don't know what to do. And I just covered it with a sheet. And they were like, oh, that was so much better. And I was like, well, yeah. Again, whatever's not giving you control, eliminate it, Mm-hmm. And you get really good at that. You get good at looking at things and being like, they're probably going to do this, or they're probably going to do that, or, just like when you're doing, like risk management, right? You look around and you see, like, I don't want them to slip on that, or I don't want anybody to cut themselves on this. You start doing the same thing with discipline. You're like, I don't want them to start fiddling with this, or I don't want anybody to be upset that they didn't get something here, so I'm going to try to put these separate, or things like that. It comes with time. But,
if you had kind of all of the years together in a class, would you use those same tactics if there was still 7th years there? Like, you would kind of hide everything under a sheet if there was 1st years there? Or how would you, like, manage that difference?
Really, it depends on the class. I would definitely start out with the sheet covering things. It's just easier for me, or like, if you're going to put things out, make sure they're near you. Because, the kids sometimes want to see things. So you can have them come up and you can just tell them, like, okay, no touching, but you can look. And a lot of the time, that's just all they want. Or you could set one out that they can look at. Maybe you have a completed one and you can put it out and be like, all right, you can come up and look, but then you need to go sit down. Because ultimately, they're just curious. And if they're acting out because they want to see things, it's because they're just curious and they feel like that need is not really being met. So you can either keep the curiosity quiet by covering the thing, or you can eliminate it by just letting them see whatever it is they want to see, but in a controlled way.
Okay.
Like, I might let them fiddle with a little bottle for a minute or two, and then I'm going to take it back. And be like, okay, you'll get yours in a little bit. Let's go sit down. And then they feel a little bit less like I'm just telling them, like, you just sit. Like, And I really hate when I hear anybody in an authority position say, because I said so. That's really frustrating. And kids really respond well to when you explain things to them. you know, if you explain to them, we're going to pull these out later, I don't want yours to get broken, or I don't want you to lose yours. They're like, oh, now I understand why I can't have it right now. You'd be surprised just how powerful that is. Or especially if you tell them, well, I'll give you one in after we talk about this. They're like, oh, okay. It's not that I can't see it. I just get to see it in maybe 10 minutes. And that can be really powerful. I mean, it depends on your kid. You know, it depends on how they respond to things. But just talking to them, not like adults because they're not adults, but talking to them like they're humans and, you know, not pets, giving commands. It can be really powerful, and I think they really appreciate that. So, like, odds are the best teachers that you remember having, some of the best teachers I remember, my favorite teachers, were the ones that did just talk to us and explain things to us. And, you know, they would, you know, tell us if we were not listening and being frustrating, they would just be like, you know what, I worked really hard on this and you guys aren't listening, so you clearly don't want to do this, so everybody's just going to fail today. And that was always really shocking and jarring for us. We'd be like, but I still want to do the activity. And she'd be like, well, too bad. You're not listening and I'm not going to talk over you. So, and that, I remember that very distinctly. The first time I ever heard a teacher say that was that we just weren't going to do it and we were just going to fail. And I was like, oh, wow. And I've said that before at Trefoil. I've been like, okay, then we just won't do our herbology. Especially now, because these are the classes that they have personally chosen and they picked them ahead of time. You know, they got to select what classes they wanted. And I'm like, well, you chose yoga, or you chose leadership, or you chose this over other classes, and you're choosing to not listen to me. So you're wasting your own time. So I'm not going to put in the effort if you're not going to. Mm-hmm. So that works really well if it's the whole class not listening. Now, if it's just one student, that can obviously be a little bit more tricky. But one apple really can spoil the bunch. It really can. I've definitely had classes where if this certain student wasn't there, they listened so much better. Or if this one student was in a good mood that day, then the kids really paid attention. They really enjoyed it. But if she was in a bad mood, there's just no control over the class. So when that happens, I would try to, and I think Ash would refer to this as the alpha student. If you have an alpha in your class, trying to get them to work with you is your best tactic there. And that can be infuriating because you're the teacher. So, but definitely trying to give them a reason. I mean, for me, I try to show them that, you know, the class is going to be more fun than not listening. You're going to have a lot more fun actually paying attention, especially here because Trefoil is something that these kids have chosen to do. These classes are classes they have chosen to take, and reminding them of that and reminding them that, you know, you've waited all year for this. Why are you wasting your opportunity? That's just my personal stance on it and my personal take. But you know, you'll find your way of speaking to the kids and getting them to understand your perspective. I really recommend that personally. So, did you have any more questions?
When this is kind of half with a class and half just in general, but when you're leading a group of kids, whether it's your year group to an activity or during a lunch or breakfast, how do you apply, or how do you make to and from a class or to and from an activity kind of fun, or not just, okay, let's go back to the house and do stuff. And be like, oh, let's grab everything, and they're still kind of enjoying themselves and talking about what they did on the way back, because it'll be further away because everything is kind of separated out.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. So when we were at Ishimani, it was so much smaller. I would do things like be like for breakfast, I'd be like, should we fly to breakfast? And the kids would be like, what? And then we'd like bust out like airplanes, or we'd jump, or, you know, we'd try to make it fun. And that can be cool if you're not going that far. But I mean, as we're at this next place, maybe there is something they can do for a decent distance that, you know, will make it more exciting. But you can also, I find that the kids really enjoy talking with us and getting to know us or our characters. So you can do things like, I mean, you can ask them questions about themselves or their days, because they really enjoy talking about that. I would definitely keep an eye out for the kids that are being a little quieter, though. They might feel a little left out during those times. You could turn it into a game. I don't know if we have clues or things, but you could keep a clue in your pocket, maybe, and like as they're walking, sort of their reward if they stick near you is you have a clue that they can read with you. That might be something that they enjoy. I mean, there would be lots of different ways. If they're super young, I mean, you could definitely do it as a line, but that's going to be a really controlled way of doing it. You could do like the buddy system, like they go 2 by 2 and they walk in front of you. They might enjoy that. But again, it depends on the kid. Some kid, if you tell them like you're going to buddy up and then you're going to walk together and you're going to walk in a line, like they see that as a little too strict. It's also going to depend on the age. But yeah, I would definitely recommend something like that. I had this blue pen there was a chicken that was blue, and the kids named him Neff. One kid wanted to name him Ned, the other one wanted to name him Jeff, and then he ended up being Neff. And as we were walking, I would choose who got to hold Neff. And the holder of Neff was the line leader. And the kids actually really enjoyed that. And they liked playing with Neff, and it sort of kept their attention for a little bit. So you could bring like a little toy or something. And like as they're walking, they get to see the little toy, or, you know, things like that. Anything to sort of draw their focus and just sort of make it a little bit enjoyable and kind of a special thing. Because like if they know, oh, if I stick close and pay attention, then I get to learn a little bit more about my counselor, or I get to read a clue, or I get to play with something, or maybe I get to buddy up with my friend. Watch out for bullying and excluding people in that case, though. But you know, or I mean, you could also do something like have them. You could put them in pairs and tell them like, okay, here's the topic. Here's what you guys are going to talk about while we're walking. And I like at training, Ash had little topic cards. It was like, are you more like a bicycle or a motorcycle? Are you more like tennis shoes or sandals? Like, things like that. You could buddy them up and be like, okay, now we're going to talk about, are you more like a cat or a dog? Or, you know, and that might be kind of nice to get them to talk to a new person and get to know each other a little more. Sorry, I think I over-answered that question.
Oh, no, you're good. Good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And for the, I know most points will be more towards the beginning of the week, but how do you figure out if you see, like for quad pot is kind of what I'm doing. So for, if you see someone doing a good sport, or you see someone helping pick up something to clean up, kind of when do you give them a point, and when do you just like say thank you for doing this and do that?
So for me, it has to be something like they need to be doing something that is not obvious. For me personally, I don't think I should have to reward you for doing what you're supposed to do. And I will do that is if they really went against the grain and went against the peer pressure and did it anyways. Like I shouldn't have to give you a point for being the only kid, like for not talking and paying attention. But if I've really been struggling almost the whole class and one kid has really paid attention, I'm totally going to give them a point. And I do it very publicly. Like I will walk over and hand them a point, and house point. We still call them points. I will and do it very publicly. And a lot of the time I won't say anything because the kids will get super quiet and they'll look at you kind of like, why did she get that? And very casually I'll just be like, she's the only one listening. And I do not give another point. Like you don't get a point for listening after that. She did it because she went against the grain, but I shouldn't have to give you a point for doing what you're supposed to be doing. But that's my personal take on it. So if I see a kid like I've watched 10 kids walk by this trash on the road and nobody has picked up something. And then I finally see one kid like sort of think to themselves, I'm gonna go pick that up. Yeah, I'll totally give them a point. But I could be strict. I think if I sat down and thought about it, I might actually be able to remember every instance that I've given out points. So outside of like you earned them in class, like times that I just knew that this kid had done well and gave them points. But yeah, for me personally, they need to do something that is abnormal. They need to do something that shows me that they are trying a little harder, or they are trying to think outside the box a little more. Then I give points. Because again, if you just take your tray at the end of lunch, well, you're supposed to do that. And you know, so maybe it's the kid that really sat there and decided to go collect all the empty trays, then I would give them 1 point. A 5-point token from me would be something very big. I'm trying to think of any instance in which I would give a 5-point token. That would probably be like every time I had this class, they were frustrating for me. So at the end of the week, I gave the kid that was always listening a 5-point token. Yeah, a lot of that, and a lot of that's instinctual. Like, there's no real wrong way to do it. I just, it's all going to be by your instincts and what you personally believe. Because really, when you give them points, it's you personally feeling like they've done something to earn this. So I would just keep that in your head. Do you want to give out all this stuff just because you want to make friends or you want the kids to like you? Like, for me personally, I don't want to do that. I want my kids to feel like when I've given them a point that I have genuinely acknowledged behavior that I value and that we value and that we're trying to teach. And I want it to be impactful for them. Mm-hmm. And that's just what I try to keep in mind when I'm giving out points.
Okay. I'm just writing this down real quick.
It's okay. Again, a little afraid I'm over answering.
Oh, it's better to over answer than under answer. So you're good.
Yeah. By the way, do you feel like I answered your earlier questions? I hope I didn't like go off on a tangent and like didn't answer you.
I think you did. If I think of something, I can bring it up and all that.
Okay. Sounds good. Okay. Well, did you have any more questions? It's totally fine if you don't.
You're good. I'm trying to think of every possibility because sometimes it'll be after a talk and then I'll go, oh man, I should have asked that question. So I'm trying to think.
Yeah. Well, never be afraid to send me a message. I have no problem with that. So I'm always willing. And you know, when we're there, if you have a question, feel free to find any of us really. But yeah, I have always like very open door. Please feel free.
Okay. Okay, this is kind of on a tangent of what's the line between controlling and too controlling, but when the tone of voice, I'll typically use a happier tone of voice, but how, I don't know if assertive is the right word, but kind of when you're trying to tell your class to do something, or not if they're like not listening, you're trying to get them to listen, but kind of just for anything, for I guess all different scenarios, what kind of tone, or wait, like what, if you do need them to listen a little bit or kind of not necessarily take more control of them, but kind of make sure that they are going to listen and kind of do what they're supposed to do. How do you like get across what you're trying to get across without sounding too kind of rah at them? That's not like control.
Okay. Like, yeah. How do you develop your teacher tone, as we call it? Yeah. So for me, a big thing, I have definitely gone too harsh with my teacher tone before. And when that happens, I would just acknowledge it. I would explain to the kids, like, I shouldn't have been that harsh, but here is why I was frustrated. And I think you'd be surprised how much the kids respond to that, because we're gonna make mistakes. I've made children cry before. Like, it's totally happened, and I felt really bad about it, and I realized I was way too harsh. And all I did was, I definitely get down on their eye level, because kids are scared of adults if they're too much taller than you, or because that's very intimidating. So really only use standing over them if you're really trying to take control. Taking a step forward is very intimidating. So I would get down on their eye level and just tell them, like, look, I was a little too harsh. So if you're scared of that, it happens. You have to learn how to harness that, and it's definitely try to keep a lid on it. But if it does happen, just try to acknowledge it and pay attention to what you're doing and how it probably made your kids feel. But me, when I use my teacher tone, I try to drop it as soon as I'm done with it. Like, I get my point across, and then I go right back to being a teacher. Like, you really do have to be schizophrenic. So you have to be like, hey, I don't know why we're not listening, but it's not okay. And then you go right back to teaching. And you go right back to being as happy as you were. Because if the kids think you're still angry, they're going to be scared of you.
Okay.
And for me, I ask nicely twice. I'm like, hey guys, okay, we need to pay attention. And then I get a little bit harsher. Guys, we need to pay attention. And then we might get the, hey, I don't know why we're having so much trouble, but we're going to go back to teaching now. And then you let it go. When the issue's done, it's done. And that is one of the hardest things, I think, to learn, because the kids, they push your buttons, it's frustrating, but you definitely have to learn how to, still be the adult. And if you've gotten the point across and the kids have understood, then it's over and the issue is done with. So I try to use my teacher tone as it's used to get their attention and make them realize that I'm being serious, but it's also not a sign that I'm now angry at them and going to be mad at them all day. So, I hope that makes sense. Yeah, good.
Okay. But I think that's all the questions I can think of for right now. But if I think of any more, I'll either write you or let you know.
Definitely. Well, thank you for I didn't talk to just empty air, so I appreciate that. So yeah, Ash was like, just do it anyways, and I was like, oh gosh, I'll just talk to no one. Yeah. Anyways, and you had really good questions, by the way, so thanks. And you definitely challenged me to be like, ooh, when do I do that? Because I think an important part of teaching is you never stop learning. You never stop developing that skill. And if you feel like you've mastered it, well, you're probably not the best teacher. So, I've been a teacher for 12 years, and I'm still finding new areas and new subjects. Like, when I went to China, I felt like I had never taught a day in my life. It was such a new way to teach. And then 3 or 4 months in, it became easier, and by the end, it was a really valuable perspective and way to learn and way to start teaching. So you can always find different little pockets and things that you feel like you don't know what you're doing, and I think that that's great. I think that that's actually a really valuable learning opportunity. So take those pockets, even though they're terrifying and you feel scared, take them, and you'd be surprised how amazing it's going to be to round you out as a teacher or as a caregiver or as an authority figure. No. Okay, well, I guess we've reached the end of the hour. But again, feel free to message me at any point, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for
no problem.
I understand all this.
Okay, well, have a good night.
Thank you. You too.
Hey, bye.